Welcome to LinkedIn News Live, a show about the world of work and our place in it. I'm Nina Melendez. Every year, LinkedIn hosts our Big Ideas conversation, asking what can we expect in the upcoming year and what big ideas will change the world. Let's go over some of the hits and misses of the big ideas we pitched for 2022, meaning in 2021, we pitched for this year. And let's start with the metaverse, Web3 industry. So we predicted that big tech wouldn't fully own the metaverse, and it was a hit. We were right. 2022 is projected to be the biggest year for the metaverse, but the world needed a bit more time to adopt. And Facebook's Meta felt the pain the most. Its investment in the tech company in the tech paired with the economy forced the company to lay off about 13% of its total workforce. All right, let's move on to our misses. So here's what we didn't get right. We predicted that cities will run on crypto, but 2022 was a rough year for cryptocurrencies. First, Bitcoin's value dropped 65% since the start of the year. Second, cryptocurrency Luna also suffered a near almost total collapse in value. And of course, more recently, FTX went from buying Super Bowl ads to crash landing into bankruptcy. Another miss that we had was in the NFT space. We said that NFTs would shake up the mortgage market, but they didn't quite impact the real estate market as expected. Okay, here to unpack all this for us and to give us her take on what we can expect in 2023 is Cathy Hackl, who is the founder and chief metaverse officer at Journey and knows about all things Web3 related. So ask her your questions. Cathy, welcome back to the show.
Excited to be back.
So first question, what is your big idea for Web3 in 2023?
I think we're going to continue to see a lot of consolidation of Web3 companies or brands being acquired by bigger players, which I find really interesting. And I think even bigger than that, I think we're going to see a lot more fashion and metaverse and Web3 come together, including art. So yeah, it's a really exciting time to be a part of the industry, despite all the negative things that are happening. And I'm sure we're going to talk about that.
Yeah, I actually want to talk about the art bit in a moment. But, people have been critical of Web3, saying that it doesn't quite provide complete safety and security. Do you think that will change next year? Will the security catch up with the technology and make people a little bit more comfortable with using it?
Yeah, I think there's going to be different approaches, right, to the market. There's definitely this need, I think, in Web3 to make it easier for people to be part of the ecosystem. It's still quite hard. And not everyone, the mass market, to be honest, is not ready to be kind of like jumping through hoops and setting up a million types of wallets to try to buy one NFT. So definitely, I think it's going to change. It's going to evolve. It's hopefully going to become easier, more simple for people to kind of get onboarded. But yeah, there's still a lot of friction right now when it comes to actually being part of Web3. Although I do appreciate the Web3 ethos of interoperability, which is something that's desirable, but is not here right now.
Do you think that perhaps by this time next year, being a part of Web3 will be like how we talk? I mean, we're just part of the web now.
It'll depend. For example, you've got Starbucks, I believe today or tomorrow, launching their loyalty rewards program, which is in essence NFTs without calling them NFTs. So you're going to start to see a bigger amount of people going into Web3 without them thinking they're going into Web3. I think that's the magic of it, right? Of actually not calling it an NFT or not calling it Web3, and people just evolving and going into this. So definitely, I don't know if, I don't have a number of how many people will be onboarded into Web3, but I think it's probably going to be, there's going to be some good traction, I think, in the next couple of months.
So NFTs were all the rage the first half of this year. It's like all anyone was talking about. But trading volume has dropped about 97% in 9 months by some estimates. Will they, have a big resurgence next year in ways that, you were mentioning Starbucks. Will they have a big resurgence next year in ways that are a little bit more intentional, like people purchasing and people investing in them?
I think the era of the NFT that is just a picture, right? What is a profile picture NFT? That was, the thing last year and the beginning of this year. That era, in my perspective, is over. Now, what you're truly starting to see is that when people buy an NFT, they actually want some utility, some true utility, whether it's access to a community, access to events. Is it a physical item that is tied to the NFT? You're starting to see a lot of this, obviously, in the fashion industry. So yeah, I think that those days are done. There's been a market correction across the board in every market, obviously. including the NFT space. But actually, it's a good thing. It's a good thing because it moves us away from scams and what's called the pump and dump in the NFT space into more serious ways of approaching these projects. And that's just going to benefit the people that are actually buying the NFTs.
I was at Milken conference this year, and they were offering free NFTs to people if you could pick one. And I hadn't, Kathy, I didn't know what I was doing. I was like, that looks pretty, I'll take it, And every now and then I get an email like, check in on your NFT and how it's, and how it's doing. And I gotta do that. So let's talk about machine learning and artificial intelligence, because that is a huge thing, and it's changing our lives, and it's going to change our lives. Can you give us a little peek into what you think or how you think this will happen for us in 2023?
Yeah, I think that, what we're seeing with ChatGPT, for example, over the last 2 days, it has been, 1 million users in the matter of days, right? And many people on LinkedIn posting what ChatGPT created for them. It has been really interesting to look at. So it'll continue, I think it's going to accelerate a lot further, but it's going to force us, to be honest, to ask really existential questions about the future of work and what it means to be a writer, what content is, and the value of content. It's going to force us to have these conversations, whether it's an image created by Midjourney, whether it's an essay or an article written by ChatGPT. I think it's going to force us to have these really very important conversations around creativity, right? The promise was that AI is never going to replace us because we're very creative. Well, we're starting to see some of this starting to happen. So that's one part. I also think that you're going to start to see new jobs, like whether it is AI creative director, right? These types of roles that are actually going to be able to work with these tools in a very good way. I think you're going to start to see a lot more roles like that start to be created and people starting to recruit them. You already have, for example, agencies creating business units around this. So I don't see that slowing down. I do think it's going to force us to have interesting conversations. We're going to have new roles. It's just going to continue accelerating. And with that, with the metaverse, I think there's this tie-in with conversational AI, not so much the virtual assistants, that we talk to. I don't want to say the names because I don't want to wake them up. But, I think conversational AI, when it comes to the metaverse, is going to be really important. So,
and for those who aren't totally up to date, ChatGPT is artificial intelligence that people can use to write everything from essays and poems and emails and code. So it really will, in a way, or can replace human jobs. And so I loved your point about having us ask existential questions. When we look at the art space, for example, which you had brought up earlier, do you think that there will be contention in the art space, or do you think that this will be very, adopted with open arms?
I think there's some friction there. I think some cohorts are really adopting it and moving forward and using it to their advantage, but there is some friction there. What I'm really interested in is especially how the fashion industry, which has been like a first mover in the metaverse and Web3 space, how they're going to continue to adopt these AI tools, right? Are they going to impact, are we going to see more of that during Fashion Week? Next year during Fashion Month. So yeah, really interested in seeing how fashion especially is going to adopt this as we move forward.
I want to bring in actually a big idea from one of our members, John Henry Dale. He contributed a big idea. He wrote, Meta will bet the farm and whiffed badly on VR. People don't want to be completely isolated from their natural environment. Augmented reality, if executed right, could allow for more organically blended gamification of the everyday world. While it won't be everyone's cup of tea, I'd bet it hits much bigger than the metaverse. Kathy, what do you think of John Henry's big idea? Do you agree or disagree?
So I agree with him on some fronts. I don't define the metaverse as just virtual reality, as you know from our prior conversations. To me, VR, AR, mobile, 5G, edge computing, they're all enabling technologies for the metaverse, that greater vision. So in that part, I do agree. I don't think no one wants to be in a VR headset all day. That is the least thing we would want, right? So I do agree with him in the sense that augmented reality is really going to be the bigger piece of the pie, right? And we're going to start to see more and more wearables come to market that potentially are going to have augmented reality in your glasses, and that's going to have a massive impact. It's truly, in my perspective, about merging the physical and the digital, because the physical world to me is also part of the metaverse, and that's where we're going to see a big impact. So AR, 100%, huge idea for 2023 and beyond.
Before I let you go, I have to ask you about crypto. As I said earlier, we've seen a lot of trauma happen in this space. Will we get over it next year? Will we see a resurgence in crypto, or is it kind of are we having long-term trauma about it?
I think we're going to have some long-term trauma, and I actually think it's a good thing, right? Because it removes bad actors, remove things that shouldn't have happened, and it's actually going to force everyone in the crypto, the crypto side of Web3, and also in the in the technology side of Web3 to rethink a lot of things that were happening. So yeah, this market correction, as hard as it has been for a lot of people that have lost a lot of money, I think it's actually a good thing in general for the future where this was going. It was moving too fast. There was too much hype. I think it's actually a good thing because, there's bad actors being removed. So,
Kathy, I wish we could keep talking about this. It was so great to see you. And yeah, we'll leave it there, but we'll check in a couple months, see how we are with our with our crystal ball looking. Thank you so much, Kathy Hackl, founder and chief metaverse officer at Journey. And to our members, we want to take a poll very quickly on one of LinkedIn's big ideas around the future of work. And that big idea is we'll focus on when just as much as where we work. What do you think? Yes or no? Put it in the stream. We'd love to get an audience gauge on it. When and not just as much as where we work. All right, let's switch gears and talk about the healthcare industry and some of our wins and misses there. We made a lot of predictions about how healthcare would change in 2022. 2021 was a year of vaccine development, and our big idea was that 2022 would be marked by vaccinations and booster shots. But it turns out there's still a long way to go. There are several states still struggling to immunize their residents. Alabama and Wyoming are the states with the lowest share of residents that are vaccinated at about 52%, according to the CDC. And by the end of November, the average weekly number of cases in the US has increased around 8%, according to data from the CDC. So here to talk a little bit more about long COVID, specifically its impact on children, is Dr. Rhonda Meadows. She is president of Population Health Management at Providence, one of the largest nonprofit health systems in the United States, and she's also CEO of AN Health Solutions. Dr. Meadows, welcome.
Thank you, and good morning.
Good morning. Good to see you. How will the conversations around youth mental health change in 2023?
So, 2020 to 2022, which is up until today, we've been focusing on the acute exacerbation of longstanding mental health issues. Truth be told, we've seen increases in depression, anxiety, trauma that have been creeping up since before the pandemic. But now after the pandemic, along with social unrest, economic instability, all those changes, the isolation period, et cetera, we've seen those the mental illness and mental health issues escalate in children and adolescents. In 2023, I am hopeful that the focus will be more focused on actually acting. We've discovered it, we've measured it, we've researched it, but those actions need to include us moving beyond the initial funding that has been given from the federal government that actually translates now, hopefully, into actual services. That means things like increasing school-based services, increasing and improving telemedicine and digital care, as well as making sure that we start funding and investing in the pipeline of mental health professionals that we are short. We don't have anywhere near enough.
I want to talk about the investment part of it. Before I do, I want to ask you very quickly about whether you think parents are better or less equipped to handle their kids' mental health. With all of the conversation that's been going on about it, do you think parents are better or less equipped to handle their kids' mental health?
Oh, Nina, I wish I could say that they are all better, but they are not. We are a diverse population. Parents are, just as our children are. Some of us are suffering our own mental health challenges just because we're just normal human beings. And so some parents have done a better job of recognizing the stressors and the issues that impact their children and are able to assist them themselves or to get them assistance. But a lot of people are not able to have the inner resources themselves or access services outside. We know that we have health disparities that run rampant through most medical conditions. That includes mental health. But truth be told, it really is independent. It really depends on the individuals that we're talking about. We met some parents who were Johnny on the spot. They were active. They ask their kids, they talk to their children, that kind of thing. But I think that it's a mixed bag. And so I can't say that parents are better prepared. I will say that parents may be more aware of what's happening and what's going on, but they need the resources to be able to assist them.
Well, I'm going to pause the conversation very quickly, say hi to some folks who are joining us. Looks like from all over the world, all over the United States for sure. We've got Dolores from Dallas. Dolores, great to see you on the stream again. Ika from Cleveland, Lana from Canada, Emil from San Jose, and Luana from Italy. So welcome to the show. We're talking right now about the mental health impact of COVID on children and what we might see in 2023 regarding that. Dr. Meadows, do you, about COVID and the long-term impact of it, what do you think we will see culturally and otherwise? For example, will we see kids who've been socially distanced, say, experience lower immune systems or higher sick rates, or will we see kids more or less afraid of things like pandemics or needles or things like that? What are you, or kids more interested in science? What are your thoughts?
I think we're going to see all of the above. I wish I could tell you that there's one particular big trend, but that the biggest trend is actually children needing more resources and more help, more than anything else. The pandemic itself may have been really scary in the beginning in 2020, 2021 for adults and kids. There were children who actually lost their parents, lost their loved ones, who were more at risk for the more deadly form of COVID itself. There are others who just had their lives disrupted, had isolation, had school disruptions, and had come back and tried to recover, only to come into this year with, again, an increase in COVID cases in the last month or so, as well as flu and respiratory virus infections. So they're not out of the woods yet. I think we're going to find that there are, we already know that there are more children with depression, with anxiety, more children actually requesting help, seeking services. ER visits are up, as well as hospitalizations being up for suicidal thoughts. We know that that is actually already happening.
But that sounds good to me, Dr. Meadows, right? Because it sounds
that they're
like
asking.
that they're
Yes.
asking for help and that they know where to go for help.
Well, they're asking for help. They don't necessarily have a place to go. That's the challenge.
I see.
And that's the opportunity, right? If we miss the opportunity to meet them when they are telling us they have a need, then we actually can end up with a generation of lost children if we're not careful. So that's why I'm saying all of those resources need to be put to bear, like right now.
I see.
While we see these children needing to be engaged.
Will there be a rise in services that help mitigate the negative impacts of social media? And I'm thinking, maybe tech or some sort of government intervention or some policy intervention that disallows certain type of content on social media or things that are negatively impacting young children.
I wish I could give you a magic answer and say, oh, yes, there's going to be laws and policy and something's going to stop misinformation, but that's not going to be the case, to be quite honest with you. The best thing to combat misinformation is to actually give information that people can use and that people can understand. So there are increased efforts by not only government entities, but private sector, by healthcare providers, by families, to get the right and truthful information out to both parents, to children, to families, and to loved ones who actually may have a legitimate cause for questioning what they're hearing and seeing. So there are efforts to try to help people be better communicators. There are efforts to help get better information out. And there are efforts to basically go into the community and have lay health leaders and leaders in general actually be the conveyor of information in their communities and in their homes. But I think it's going to take another whole level of specialty within the communication sphere to figure out how best to combat sometimes the negative impact of social media, right? We see that controls are lessening, not increasing on social media, right? And so that needs to be more that we have to combat.
Before I let you go, what keeps you optimistic? And what do you think will be the joy and the thing that we did right in 2023 when it comes to children's mental health?
I think what'll keep me or help me be optimistic is seeing a younger cohort of young leaders. Some of them are adolescents, some of them are in their 20s, their 30s, everybody's younger to me, who become trained in how to effectively instill mental health and well-being and prevention. Those are the people that I find to be the most hopeful when I look at how well they do. They are engaging. If you notice through the pandemic itself, there were some young people who used social media in a positive manner to communicate, giving those people some formal training and actually tracking and incorporating what they do into care in general. I think that is the best hope.
Dr. Meadows, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much for just opining about the healthcare industry for next year. And let's check in. Let's check in next year, see how we did.
Thank you.
That was Dr. Meadows. And we're going to have Glenn Kelman join us next. He is the CEO of Redfin. He's going to talk about his big idea regarding housing and real estate. But first, let's look at some of the poll results. So, the big idea that we pitched was that we'll focus on when just as much as where we work. And I'm thinking, the 4-day work week instead of the 5, and maybe it's from Monday to Saturday Tuesday to Saturday instead of Monday through Friday. Maybe it's a different time during the day as opposed to our, maybe traditional 9 to 5. So we've got quite a few yeses: Dolores, Yolanda, Rick, Marnie, Nizihat, Anne, Lisa, Anna, Trisha, Nora. They all say yes. No. And no one voted no, I'm being told. So no one voted no. Very interesting to see this, that we will be talking about when we work and not just where. Okay, let's move on. Keep telling us what you think. We'll get to those. Let's talk about real estate and housing. We predicted that in 2022, the wealthiest people of the world would choose to live abroad. And we were right. About 88,000 millionaires are expected to move by the end of the year, and that's according to the Henley Global Citizens Report. But here's where we missed the mark on housing. We predicted that there wouldn't be a drop in U.S. home prices, and we were wrong. In fact, home prices have been on the decline since July, and experts are now estimating that they could fall by as much as 20% because of high mortgage rates. Well, joining to talk about all this is just the man. He is Glenn Kelman, the CEO of Redfin. Glenn, welcome to the show.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
It's good to see you. So, the whole we don't expect a major drop in home prices, we got that super wrong. Just look into your crystal ball, Glenn, and where do you see home prices going next year?
Probably a 5% drop. It might be less, it might be more. It varies by market in the United States. And of course, abroad, it's a whole different story. But clearly, the air is coming out of the balloon. And the question is just how fast it will happen.
And, your big idea, Glenn, which I loved, was that the coast will become a playground for the wealthy. Now, to me, this seems a little counterintuitive considering how much global warming is impacting our coast. And I would think that those who can afford it would actually cloister themselves in the precious real estate that is not affected by storms and floods, et cetera. So can you sort of explain what you mean by your big idea on that?
Well, the underpinning of it was a visit to Tampa Bay right after Hurricane Ian. So I was worried about our employees, but what was really weird about the trip was that so many investors were trying to buy houses that were completely underwater. So sometimes we would have lights flickering in the office. We were trying to work because the hurricane was coming, and investors are calling saying, I want to tour this property. And the only way we could get to that property was by boat. And sometimes the neighborhoods were shut down by the National Guard because it was such a disaster zone. And that's when it really became clear that regular folks were literally underwater. They were terrified that they wouldn't be able to get their home insured if they rebuilt it. But investors don't have to worry about that. They don't have to worry about getting the loan. They don't have to worry about getting insurance because they don't have the loan. They're paying cash. And they're the ones who are opportunistically buying in a market that is really exposed to climate change.
And do you think that we will see a hike in investors going and buying property versus just single family homeowners?
Well, that's a more complicated question because broadly investors are starting to pull back from the market. So you've seen some of the iBuyers get out of the business. You've seen some of the real estate investment trusts stop their purchases. There's been a fire sale, both from the iBuyers and the builders who are liquidating their inventory as quickly as possible. They're the ones who are driving the market down right now. So that's made it a more affordable market for everyone else. It used to be in 2021, 2020 that all of our customers at Redfin were bidding against investors and losing. And now the bidding wars are mostly over. The investors have stepped back. And that does create some room for regular folks to be able to buy a house.
And you had also mentioned the whole, paying in cash and paying it all in cash. Will we see a little bit more of that as well in 2023? Folks or investors swooping in, paying everything in cash and sometimes over asking price? Or since the market is sort of correcting itself, we'll see less of that? What do you think?
Well, it depends on what kind of investor you're talking about. So individuals with cash are going to be able to buy houses without worrying about the interest rate. Institutional investors who have bid with cash are still borrowing the money, and their cost of capital has shot through the roof. So I already mentioned the iBuyers and the REITs, but Wall Street in general had come on to Main Street over the past 3 to 5 years. I've been doing this job for 15 to 17 years, and I'd never seen such a high level of Wall Street activity. And now I think that is receding because rents are coming down. So if you're going to buy a house and then try to rent it out, that proposition has gotten a little riskier than it had been. And the money that you're borrowing to buy the house is suddenly more expensive. So I think the individuals who can pay cash are going to do that in 2023. But the institutions trying to do that are actually going in the other direction.
That's actually your second big idea, was that the U.S. will become a nation of renters and landlords.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, well, we're talking to all sorts of people right now about what to do with their listing. They put the property on in the late summer or the fall. It isn't unusual at this time of year to take the property off the market for the holidays. But what is different is we used to say to people, well, we'll see you in January or February. And now many of those homeowners are saying, well, actually, I've decided not to list it at all. I'm just going to rent it out. And their reasoning is that if they sold the house, they'd also have to sell the mortgage. And they have a mortgage at 2.5% or 3% for the next 30 years. And so they're going to get someone else to pay that mortgage by renting out the property. Yeah. And that is happening at unprecedented levels. Our own business is considering a shift where we add the ability to represent renters as well as homeowners. And that is something that before we just didn't want to do. But there's so many people asking us to do it that we just might.
I would love to talk about inventory right now, because that is sort of being a bit all over the place. There's a lack of inventory. We're sort of seeing the results of low building now, right, when we want to buy a bunch. Is there hope for an improvement on this and in the housing supply next year?
I think there will be more inventory. So the number of permitted buildings is fairly high. Obviously, builder confidence has plummeted, but it takes them a long time to get the land, to permit it, and to build on it. And so right now, there's a bunch of inventory headed our way. What's been different about this housing market correction, because I was running Redfin during the great financial crisis of 2008, is that in 2008, inventory shot through the roof. There were all these people who couldn't make their mortgage payment, and so they were foreclosed upon or trying a short sale. Now, even though there aren't many buyers, there aren't many sellers either. And so prices will fall because especially builders right now have to liquidate their inventory, but all the other homeowners are just taking their toys and going away. They've decided to wait out the market, and they can because they have that low mortgage rate and trillions of dollars in equity. So we would actually like to see inventory increase. It has still been near an historic low, which is just really unusual when you shift into a buyer's market.
So the mortgage rate is getting higher, but historically it's still pretty low, right? If we look at the mortgage rate over the past 20, 30 years, it's not as high as it has been.
Yeah. Well, I think consumers are pretty sensitive to it. So it's been the fastest increase in history. There's been a 4-point gain over 6 months. But that was going from like 11 to 15% mortgage rates. But having the rate double in just a few months is unprecedented.
And it's painful. It's painful for folks who are getting ready to buy, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's painful for me too. So the impact is just that the cost of the median home in America, if you factor in the price increases that we've had over the past 5 years with the increase in the cost of capital because mortgage rates are up, it means that your mortgage payment is doubled for the same house in just the space of 2 years. And so that's been really hard for people to take. Realtors will always tell you to date the rate and marry the house, that you can buy the home of your dreams now and refinance it later. But
Mhm.
just people feel too pinched to do it. And so
Mhm.
that's why we think that the number of homes sold in America, which usually oscillates between 4 and 6 million, is going to be about at the bottom of that range.
So two more questions for you, Glenn.
Okay.
One, there are a lot of potential first home buyers here in the stream, and everyone's in a different situation. But what would you say is a big tip for them when they're looking to buy?
Oh, well, the house I'm sitting in right now is one that I bought in the great financial crisis, and I wouldn't have been able to afford it unless prices had come down. So
Mhm.
sometimes you want to be greedy when other people are fearful. But the most important thing that I can tell you in a bull market or a bear market, I've watched people lose so much money in real estate because they buy houses that they don't really love.
Hmm.
If you see a house that you love, whether it's a good market or a bad market, it's hard for that to be a bad investment because you're probably going to live in it a long time. You use about 10% of your equity just on the transaction. The fees can be high, especially if you don't use Redfin, but also because of the mortgage origination and title fees and all the rest. And so the most important thing is to buy and hold, to find a house you can live in for 10 years. It'll never be a bad investment over that period of time. It's when you buy a house that you don't really love because it seems like you're trying to time the market or it's just at a good price. Don't do it.
A lot of people
So,
did that during the pandemic. It wasn't so much that they bought because they loved; they bought because they were just trying to get out of cities. And
out of Dodge. Yeah.
I know so a lot of friends who've moved, and now they're like, "Oh, what are we doing in the sticks now? Things are reopening. They want to come back."
Yeah.
So it's yeah, that is a good tip.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I submitted that idea to y'all. I think I did. I just think migration is
Uh-huh.
actually going to wane a little bit. Almost every CEO that I talk to is now asking people to come back to work. And what's been really weird about it is that the people themselves want to come back to work. That nobody wants to commute 9 to 5, 5 days a week, but people want to be back at least some of the time because we're all going crazy in our attic.
Mhm. Are you in your attic right now? Are you going crazy, Glenn?
I am in my attic. I am not going crazy. I'm actually about to leave for the office. I couldn't get everything done this morning and I got stuck here.
Okay, so one last question very quickly
Yeah.
before we let you go back to the office. What was a mistake that you saw? I mean, we've sort of touched on this, but what was
Yeah.
a mistake that you saw home buyers make last year that they should not be making in 2023? I'm thinking maybe, buying a house without full inspection done, or like you
Mm.
said, buying a home you're not really in love with. Is there anything else you can think of? Like, do not make this mistake in 2023 when you're looking for your next home.
The weirdest thing that I saw was people who were looking in 4 or 5 cities at once. So a lot of our real estate agents were saying we should support customers who are looking in Nashville and Baton Rouge and New Orleans and 2 other cities. And I said, oh, well, our core customer isn't really an investor. And it turned out that these were regular people who were completely agnostic about which city they lived in. As prices rose in one town, they'd go to the next one and the next one and the next one. And I think some of those people now regret it because, as you said, you wake up in Baton Rouge and wonder what you've done. Actually, I've never been to Baton Rouge. I'm not criticizing Baton Rouge, but I would just pick your spots
Right.
because life is in the transitions. Those are big changes, and I would make sure you really like where you are because you can fix everything about a house except, of course, its location.
Its location. Glenn, thanks for joining us here on
Yeah.
LinkedIn News Live. Thanks for your big idea, and we'll check in next year.
All right. Peace out.
Take
Bye.
care. That was Glenn Kellman, CEO of Redfin. And thank you, everyone who tuned in today. We would love to hear from you. What is your big idea for 2023? It could be any industry. We're so curious. Tell us in the comments. What do you think is going to change the way we look at the world? What is a thing we're going to be nonstop talking about in 2023? Put it in the comments, and I'm going to look at them, and I would love to hear from you. I'm Nina Melendez. Thank you so much for watching LinkedIn News Live.